Welcome back, Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham. This is my good buddy Ty Franck, and you're watching the most watched podcast in my neighborhood. Actually,
that's
no.
not true.
Actually, that's not true.
I bet that's not true.
Alexander Breckenridge has got a podcast on Virgin River on Netflix, and she's smoking us. Basically, if anybody has a podcast, they're smoking us.
No, there's like some nerds who have like a three people no one's ever heard of doing a podcast on some obscure book series that isn't doing that great.
Do you think it's our lack of talent?
Yes.
Or lack of knowledge, or our producer?
I think if there could be a list of everything in the world and you could just check all of the above.
Yeah. Maybe it's a combination of all of those. No, actually, Joseph.
Look at Joseph trying to grab some screen time for himself.
Yeah. Joseph's actually the only professional one on this podcast. What are we talking about today, Ty?
Tragically, we are
talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about the passing of one of the greats in American cinema. Recently, in the last week, we lost Gene Hackman, who, I mean, he was super old. He lived an amazing life.
95.
Got to celebrate the fact that he went out like a boss, all of that. But it's still sad to see him go.
When did you first see Gene Hackman?
Wow. Boy, he's been in so many movies, and so many movies that I've watched multiple times. I don't know where the first time I would have seen him is.
What's interesting, see, my dad was crazy, but he had a great taste in movies. And I've talked about this many times in the podcast about one of the things that me and my dad shared and what really sparked my love of movies. But my dad was actually had great taste, and he had great knowledge of movies. And he would always say this, and I remember he loved Meryl Streep, he loved Clint Eastwood, loved John Wayne, loved Denzel Washington, loved Gene Hackman, loved Humphrey Bogart, loved James Cagney. And so he would always be like, watch, he'd always make me watch these movies and watch, who this is. And I remember the first time I saw or was aware of who he was is when I saw Hoosiers. And my dad was like, watch, he's one of the great American actors. And he goes, and my dad, he's military. His dad was military, and he's like, and he was a Marine. And he goes, he's a goddamn man. You see that shit? He goes, there's nothing but boys on TV. His thing is like when I was in the 90s, when he always liked old movies and old movie stars. And in the 90s, like he would say, these guys are boys, like Brad Pitt, Johnny Depp. Like there was a time where these actors were adults. Humphrey Bogart was an adult. And we've kind of been locked in this adolescence, and we kind of like praised it, And, Gene Hackman was a goddamn man, like my dad would say.
Yeah, he was. I like that you compared him sort of briefly to Humphrey Bogart, because there are some similarities there, I think. That what the big one for me is neither Gene nor Humphrey have what we think of as the standard leading man looks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not pretty boys at all. Mm-hmm. But what they both have is an incredible charisma that transcends physical whatever, right? You don't have to look like Brad Pitt when you got the fucking charisma. Mm-hmm. And Gene Hackman always had that, even when he wasn't the prettiest guy on screen, which he often wasn't, he still felt like the biggest dick on screen, right? Mm-hmm. Just he had that charisma, that I don't even know what you call it, just the force of presence.
BDE.
Big dick energy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, he just had that. And he just, even when he wasn't playing, and he often played tough guys, but he sometimes didn't play a tough guy. So it didn't have to be from tough guy energy.
Yeah.
It was something beyond that. It was something bigger than that.
Right. He came from a place, he was grounded in his masculinity and his toughness, because he would write, he painted, he played really vulnerable in certain roles and sensitive. But it's interesting because you think about the tough guy leading men of the 70s, and then what it turned into the 80s, when it was like greased up steroid muscles and shit like Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. But there's something about like Hackman. It's like, motherfucker doesn't work out. He doesn't, like, he's not like handsome, like, square jawed, but you don't want to fuck with him.
No. And the last time that guy worked out was in boot camp.
In fucking boot camp. And he joined the Marines when he was 16 years old. And that probably had a lot to do with his maturation and like why he came. Like, he was always 47 years old. He was perpetually 47 years old.
Yep.
And I started thinking about like this podcast. Like, I've always loved Gene Hackman, and I've always loved everything that he's done. And I think Hoosiers was the first thing that I saw, because I remember the sequence of how I saw or discovered an actor. And the next movie I saw that I remember being really impacted with Gene Hackman was Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood. And I was like, who the fuck? And then as I got older,
Unforgiven is one of his great roles.
Oh man. And what's interesting is, like, even as we're doing this thing in the Red Clay that I told you about, there's a guy named Cliff Parks in it. And I was like, watch Gene Hackman in Unforgiven, where he does not think he's the villain of the town.
No.
He thinks he is the peacekeeper, and he has a code. And if you violate this code, then he's going to defend the town against you and your violation of the code that he has. So he has his own sense of morality. And that morality to us from the outside is watching seems warped. But in his mind, he's a good guy, and he's the defender of the people in this town. And that's so much more powerful and such a smarter choice as an actor and as a writer in that movie. And that's why it's so effective.
I mean, in many ways, that movie is a movie about toxic masculinity, right? About the ways in which men try to prove their worth to other men, and the toxic levels that can go to. But at the same time, all my favorite movies, all the most clever movies, there's a movie called The Lookout, which I think you and I have talked about before. You won't watch it because you don't like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but it's his best movie. It's a fantastic movie. But there's a thing in The Lookout that they do where every character in that movie has one scene where they portray a character trait that seems opposite of who they have been up to that moment. And it's very soft spoken. It's not, they don't draw a lot of attention to it, but it just instantly, every character feels like a three-dimensional person.
Right.
Because they're not just one thing.
Right.
And the thing with Unforgiven is, even in the midst of all this sort of guys swinging their dicks around and talking about how how badass they are, everybody gets another moment. And Gene Hackman's moment is his house, right?
Yeah.
He's like, he's building this house. He's not good at it. It's leaking all over the place, but he's taking such pride in it. Yeah. Taking such pride in the fact that he's building it, and he talks about his dreams of what it will be, and that when it's done, he'll sit on his porch and drink coffee and watch a sunset, and that's his dream of what this is going to be. That's so not, doesn't seem like the same guy who beats the shit out of people who come into his town, right?
Right.
But
and at the end, when he's dying, the first thought he has is
the house.
Yeah, house.
Yeah. I don't deserve this. I was building a house. Yeah. Is what he says. Yeah. But the thing is, to do that well, the writer can't just do that. The actor has to be able to sell it. And what Hackman does is he sells this very almost split personality. This guy who's fun, and his deputies like him, and he seems like a good guy, and he's building the house, and he's not very good at it. And that's one kind of person. And then when English Bob comes into town and he recognizes him, he goes, "Oh, that guy's an assassin." Mm-hmm. And confronts him, and he's so like, "Come on, Bob, give me the one that's in your hat." He seems so charming, and so like, you would want to cooperate with this guy because he's such a nice guy. And the minute that he knows he's disarmed Bob, he just starts beating the shit out of him. Yeah, I guess you think I'm beating you now, Bob. I guess you think I was kicking you in the ribs there, Bob. And it's so psychotic,
right? Well, I think what it is he seems so reasonable that he seems so reasonable. Ease. Yep. He puts you at ease, and like, okay, he's going to be fair. He's going to do this thing.
Yep.
But then he just, and that sudden shift, I'm a child of the 80s, and I had a certain idea of like, okay, this is the good guy. This is the cop. And later, I think it was in the 90s or when I was watching these old movies with my dad, I remember going back and watching The French Connection. And I remember Fistful of Dollars, Dirty Harry, and The French Connection. Like I saw that all within the same. And it was the first time I saw. So like I'm watching The French Connection, like Papa Doyle, and I'm like, okay, he's the cop, he's the good guy. And then I'm like, well, wait, he's racist. You know,
he's super racist.
He's super racist. And wait a minute, you can't. That's not the law. And so you realize, like, it was the first time like I was exposed to like anti-heroes, and I'm like, wait, he's not. And then you realize in that movie that his choice is he's not going after the bad guy to do the right thing. He's going after the bad guy because he wants to win, because it's obsession. It's his obsession with his job to save his job. And there's a chase scene. There's a chase scene that embodies his energy and his drive in The French Connection. And I don't know what it is, William Friedkin. You remember how we talked about Sorcerer, how dangerous that chase scene was? This is one of the. So if you compare one of the greatest television or the greatest movie chase scenes, you got Bullet, and then you got The French Connection of that period. And Bullet is two cars that are evenly matched, and it's flashy, it's style, and these two guys that can fucking drive, right?
Yep.
Then in The French Connection, you got Gene Hackman that's not a good driver. Like he's like he's just fucking. And what I love about The French Connection too is like I'm a child of the '80s, and everybody's like superheroes at their skills, like their gun skills and everything. He was like the way he held his gun, the way he shot his gun. He was just, his superpower was like how obsessed and driven he was. And there's a chase scene where he's chasing a train in the middle of New York City. And that is the scariest, most dangerous chase scene that I think we've ever seen on film. Because, and I'm sure somebody had to have died when they're doing that scene. And that car was mounted, the camera's mounted on his car, and he's running through traffic. There's cars going the other way, and he's running, I don't know. And he's chasing a train that's on tracks.
Yep.
And he's going through the fighting the traffic. And you know, that brings me to this point. The sidebar. Sorry, Joseph. I guess there's a podcast that Joseph and I like whenever they go on sidebar. They go sidebar. But the whole like, and Joseph, maybe you can chat GPT this. The whole like commandeering a car, like you know, like in the movies where they go, police business, and they throw the guy out of the car and they get in there. Is that a thing? Is that real? Can you do that? Why Joseph looks that up? Because this poor bastard.
I don't think it works like it does in movies.
Well, this poor bastard. I'm watching French Connection, and I'm like, wait a minute. So the guy goes up on the train. The train takes off. He's like, Papa Doyle is fired up. He's going to get this guy. He stops in front of a speeding car, throws his badge. The guy's like, open the door, like, what's going on? He's fucking yanks his ass out of the car, throws him on the ground, and it's like, police emergency. Gets in the car, and then and the guy's like, am I going to get my car back? And he takes off and commences and starts to beat the shit. He just out of this car and just running through. He probably killed more people than he saved. And then he finally gets to this guy. The guy on the train killed like 6 people. He gets out. Gene Hackman has a snub-nosed 38 special, and he's just blasting away. Kills the guy that rolls down the stairs, and he falls on the stairs. And then he's like sitting there like, job well done. Get the city safe today. It's like, what the fuck is this, man? And it was the first time I remember being aware of what they would say in those days, the anti-hero, where, this guy is not driven by doing the right thing, by morality. He has his own code. And what's interesting is when you watch The French Connection, you root for him. And then you go back and you're like, why do I root for him? Does that have more to do with Gene Hackman than it does the character?
I think you have to give a lot of the credit for that to Gene Hackman, yeah, because it's just it's his charisma, man. He just had that, whatever it is, whatever that actor thing is that some people have and you clearly don't. It's that charisma. I mean, I like you. I've worked with you. You're no Gene Hackman. No, it's possible that French Connection might be the first time I really noticed Gene Hackman, because that came out in the 70s, and I think it was on. I think there was like the edited TV version of it on TV one night.
And my parents, that had to be horrible.
And my parents watched it.
French
So I
Connection.
remember watching part of it, and then at one point they kicked me out of the room. So I don't know if it was because it was too violent or whatever.
Right.
But I remember watching part of it. I remember being confused by it because I watched a lot of cop shows, right? Like, you know, I grew up on Adam 12, right? So, you know, the cops driving around in their car, making jokes to each other and then arresting people who shoplifted, right? That was a cop show. And then this thing was just like chaos, right? That's, that might be the first time I really Gene Hackman, but I'll tell you, so what this would have been in the early 90s. I don't remember the exact year the movie came out, but I moved out when I was 18, and then I did a bunch of terrible jobs. One of the jobs I did was at this where I worked for this little town newspaper.
Barrel Boy?
Huh?
Barrel Boy?
Yeah, basically. I was working at this little town newspaper selling ads, like when I was like 19. It was like the worst job ever. But there was the little local theater that the ladies, because I was their ad rep, like if I came in and said, "Hey, ladies who own the theater," they would go, "Oh yeah, just go on up, go ahead on in." I never had to pay for a movie there, and I was the only person.
What town?
I'm not gonna say because I don't like to give details about my past.
Yucca?
Yes, it was Yucca. They had a balcony, and they would let me sit up there. It was like I had no money. I had like zero money. If you took all the money in the world and got rid of it, that's how much money I had. So being able to go to this little theater for free was like a big deal, right? And I remember going in there, and it didn't matter what was on. Like it was, who cares, right? So I would go in there, and one time I went in there and I sat down, and it was the first run of Mississippi Burning, which is not a movie I would have ever, because that was during my like phase where everything had to be Die Hard, right?
Right.
Die Hard or Aliens. If it wasn't Die Hard or Aliens, I didn't want to watch it.
Right.
So it was not a movie like that, so I never would have picked it.
Right.
But I'm so glad I accidentally watched it because I remember sitting up in that balcony watching that movie, and it was just a fucking revelation.
Yeah.
That like, oh, this is what good movies look like.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I never knew that this was what good movies look like. And Gene Hackman in that movie is incredible. And the reason I bring it up because it's exactly what we were talking about with the sort of combination of vulnerability and tough guy thing. Because he's the scariest dude in that movie. When he starts slapping the deputy around in the barber shop, you honestly believe he will kill him.
Yeah.
Right? And you can tell the deputy does too. Yeah. But at the same time, every scene he has with Frances McDormand is so soft.
Yes.
And so vulnerable and so gentle. And he seems so scared that he's going to be hurt.
Yeah.
In those
I mean,
scenes.
even if you watch The Firm, you know, he plays that character. He's so, you know, sensitive. He has a crush on the girl. He's so soft. And, you know, did you ever see Scarecrow? That movie that he did with Al Pacino in the 70s? It was
I think so. I believe I did. I'm not remembering the plot off the top of my head.
It's a phenomenal movie. It's a very 70s character, relationship-driven movie. It's a phenomenal movie, but the performances are phenomenal. And he plays a guy with a hair trigger, and he loses his shit in this movie. And when he loses his shit, this motherfucker can lose his shit. This is not acting. Like there is an underlying anger that's always bubbling. It's always
By
there.
the way,
and he's dangerous. He's a dangerous actor.
That's actually accurate. I have a story about that.
Let's hear it.
From when I was living in Santa Fe. So I wasn't actually living in Santa Fe. So when I worked for George, like 3 days a week, I would stay up in Santa Fe because that's where his offices were. Our office would get the local news, and everybody knew Gene Hackman lived in town, but you know we had never met up with him or run into him or anything. But everybody knew it. There was like the buzz. Gene Hackman and his wife live here in town, and apparently he used to listen. He would go to the local restaurants and stuff, and he was very chill, you know. And people there were chill; they didn't bug him or whatever. So I thought that was very cool that he and his wife got a relaxing, you know, end of life kind of period there in Santa Fe. We would get the local newspaper. One day I come in and I read the headline is Gene Hackman knocked some dude out. So I'm reading the article, and Gene Hackman and his wife had gone into a local restaurant. There was they were in the bar area. There was some kind of altercation. Somebody had made some sort of comment to Gene Hackman's wife, and they went outside, and the guy followed them out. And when the guy followed them out, Gene Hackman just turned around and punched him in the face and knocked his ass out, and then got his wife out of there. Right. Then I heard later, the scuttlebutt, this wasn't in the newspaper article, but I heard later from people that the reason that Gene Hackman was so angry so you knew his wife was Asian, right?
Yeah.
The guy who had made the comment made some sort of racist comment to her. Then when they went out, Gene Hackman was like, let's get out of here before I kick this guy's ass. So they went out. The guy followed them out. That was all he needed. Like, oh, you followed us out. That means you mean ill. I'm not waiting.
Yeah. Yeah.
and just knocked the suit out. And at the time, I think he was like 80.
Did he get in any kind of trouble?
No.
Did he get sued? Good for
not
Gene
that I ever
Hackman.
heard.
Fuck, he just rose in my esteem if I didn't even think that was possible.
So, important safety tip: don't make racist comments to Gene Hackman's wife because you'll be counting your teeth.
Yeah, well, he'll haunt you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about just don't make racist comments?
Yes. Okay.
Let's
so there's
phase that
levels
out.
to this.
Yeah,
There's levels. There's levels of fucked up here, right?
Yeah. Right. But yeah, Scarecrow. That was a phenomenal movie. It's an odd movie, but what was interesting to me about Hackman and in reading about them, number one, there's not a lot. Like, he is not one of those actors that there's a lot out there about. He was a very private guy. He kept to himself in a lot of ways. He's legendary, can be kind of prickly on set. But a lot of people describe it like he's not mean, that he hates indecisiveness and he hates wasting time. So if everybody's prepared, everybody works hard, then he's good to go. Viggo Mortensen was talking about Crimson Tide and was like, he hangs out with the crew, doesn't go back to his trailer. He's kind to everybody. He goes, but he can't stand it if anybody kissed up to him. So if you just treated him like a normal person, did your job and everything, he was fine. And so that's a different, so there's a difference between that and being mean. He had inauspicious beginnings as an actor. And he went to the Pasadena Playhouse where he met Dustin Hoffman. They were there. He got kicked out of the Pasadena Playhouse and they voted him most likely to not succeed.
That's nice.
And also Dustin Hoffman. He ended up going to New York and he struggled. Like, the struggle was real in New York for over a decade, doing Broadway stuff, trying to put together a living for him and his wife in those days. Him, Dustin Hoffman, Robert Duvall, they became best friends. Robert and Dustin lived at his house in New York with his wife at some point. They slept in his kitchen, on his kitchen floor. That's how small it was. And it wasn't until Warren Beatty saw him in a play, and when he was doing Bonnie and Clyde, he asked Arthur Penn to go see this play because he thought Gene Hackman was very good. Actually, I take that back. Gene Hackman had one scene in a movie that Beatty was doing, and Beatty was like, "This guy's good. This guy's very good." Then he was doing a play, and he asked Arthur Penn to go see this play, and that's how he got into to Bonnie and Clyde. So he had nothing really going on until he was 37. And so probably the reason that he was perpetually like 47 in our eyes is because his real first moment or breakthrough was 37. And I always find that the guys that break through late like that, they tend to have a more stable, long-lasting career.
Yeah.
Because I think they've developed a craft. They've really cut their teeth. And when it comes,
and they appreciate what they've got.
Yeah.
Because you give somebody, that's why so many like sport athletes just are complete knuckleheads later in life, because you take some 19-year-old, you give them millions of dollars and the adulation of millions of people. They don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And they start to behave like it's because they deserve that, because that's what they're owed by life. Right.
Yeah.
And then they wind up turned out into complete knuckleheads later.
Right.
Child stars have that same struggle.
Yeah.
I think when you bang your head against the wall for 20 years,
yeah,
and then finally break in, you never presume that you were owed that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, how hard it is to get.
Yeah.
And you take it seriously. It doesn't surprise me that, as a guy who did time in the Marines, which, I know you're in the Navy and you have nothing but contempt for the Marines, but going through Marine boot camp is not easy. I'm teasing you, Wes.
I know you're teasing, but
going through boot camp is not easy. Being a Marine is not easy. It's a tough lifestyle when you're a young man.
Well, 16.
Yeah, 16. So coming out of that and then spending 20 years trying to break into acting, you got some leather on you. You got some scars.
Well, this is interesting. This is an interesting story to me that Gene Hackman tells, is that I think he was 12 or 13. His dad, he was out playing with some friends. His dad, who he had who was his dad that lived at home and raised him, was driving by and he saw him, and his dad gave him a wave and he waved back, and his dad just kept on driving. Never saw him again. Left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Right. So that's at 12. And he was telling this story in the actor's studio with James Limpton. He's telling the story and he breaks down. He has a moment in the moment. And you could tell it's hitting him, and he's like, fuck, I don't want this to happen now. Like that's the last fucking thing he wants to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he kind of, and Limpton kind of pulls him through. He gets through it, and he goes, it's only been like 45 years,
Right.
I'm clearly over it. But you see there's a real deep hurt and pain there. Then this motherfucker goes into Marines at 16. You're not long from being a baby. Like my kid is 10 years old now, and I put 6 years on that, and he's still a baby.
Yeah, can you imagine your kid 6 years from now being a Marine?
No. Fuck
yeah,
no.
See?
Going to boot camp? No. 18 I can, but not 16. Anyway, so to go through that kind of pain and to go through the shit that he went through at the time that he went through it, and then he went into the Marines at 16, he's an adult. By the time we get to him at 37, like he's lived a life. He's felt pain. And all of that really goes into his work and makes it so layered and rich and complex.
In addition to being a classic tough guy, which he was, in addition to that, it allows him to draw from that well of sadness, of hurt, that we were talking about with his father. And he said even on the actor's studio, you had that moment of pain, recalling that moment. That was the genius of Gene Hackman. He could be the toughest guy in the room in one scene, and in the very next room could seem like a vulnerable child. And that's not easy to do. That's what makes him one of our greats, that he could play both of those things and seem like the same guy.
Yeah. And I think that's a real tough guy. A real tough guy can show his vulnerability and cry and do those things, but it doesn't change the fact that he's a real tough guy. One thing that is underrated about Hackman that doesn't get talked about as much as it should, and one ability that he has that a lot of his peers and actors of the same ilk don't do as well, is comedy. Do you remember him in Young Frankenstein?
Oh yeah,
where he plays the blind. Like he's the birdcage. There's been plenty of comedic performances that he's done, and he knocks it out of the park. The Royal Tenenbaums. He's fucking hilarious.
He's fantastic in Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah.
The Gene Hackman in Young Frankenstein story is a great one because he wasn't supposed to be in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just bugged Mel Brooks into giving him a part in the movie, and then he's like, "All right, you can play this little blind monk character that is going to be on screen for 10 seconds," and then Hackman kills it. Steals the show. So it's even when he had to push his way in, he was still the best guy in the room.
Right. You've heard the stories about him and Wes Anderson on the Royal Tenenbaums.
I have not. No.
So it's legendary how he just dragged Wes Anderson. Like they had, Wes Anderson didn't really do much in return, but Gene Hackman just kind of was like, who the fuck? So Gene Hackman, Wes Anderson has a very specific and very clear vision, right? And it's very specific to him. And Gene Hackman hates to be directed. He doesn't want to be directed. Just give me the script, give me the part, leave me the fuck alone. And Wes Anderson and Clint Eastwood had a part about this, and Clint Eastwood was like, yeah, he likes to be left alone, which Clint Eastwood, that's part of his style. He likes to be left alone. He doesn't like to do a lot of takes. Wes Anderson is very specific, and he's got to dial you into the specific vision he has, and he's probably going to need to do a lot of takes. So it was just a recipe for disaster. And at the time, Wes Anderson wasn't really Wes Anderson, and Wes Anderson had he looked like a child. He had like really short haircut and everything. And Gene Hackman was like, who the fuck? You can YouTube, like there's scenes in there where you could just see Gene Hackman looking and be like, who the fuck is this child? Like giving me notes and he has scenes with dogs and scenes with kids and I think there's just moments where he's like, why am I not in Santa Fe writing books? Like why am I here? I want to be painting. But I wonder when the movie came out and it was such a great movie and he's so good in it, I wonder if he would give Wes Anderson a call and just be like, sorry, a little bit of a jerk in that. Kind of fucked up. Because, Tom Hardy did that in Mad Max. Like he ragged the shit out of Frank. They had a really horrible time working together. That's why he didn't reprise his role as Mad Max. And when the movie came out and Tom Hardy saw it, he called and he was like, you know what? I was wrong. I'm sorry. The movie's brilliant. So
yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that I think part of that thing with Hackman, I shouldn't say I know, I believe part of that thing with Hackman is I think there was still some insecurity there. I mean, this was a guy who had beat his head against a wall as you were saying, for like 20 years before he got any notice at all. And I've seen him talk about stuff that he did because he was nervous in front of the camera because he didn't have enormous confidence in his craft early on. Like the famous story, and it may be apocryphal, but I've heard it repeated by numerous people who worked with Hackman. So I don't know, but that, early, he had that style where he would like start talking to you. He'd have his hands in his pockets. He'd be looking at the floor. Like it was a very common sort of physical thing that Hackman did in a lot of roles. And he apparently admitted to everybody, he started doing that because he could never hit his mark. So he would stare at the floor so that he walked to his mark and stopped at the right spot. And it just became kind of a thing for him that's how, that's kind of how he always sort of entered a scene, his hands in pockets, looking down, just kind of mumbling under his breath, staring at the floor, then walk over and then stop and then look up and be like, and then really sort of throw the force of his personality at you. Anybody who's doing that has some insecurity about their craft, right? So a guy who's had enormous success but still has a little bit of well of insecurity, when some director starts directing the shit out of them, there's a lot of ways in which that's not going to play well.
Yeah,
right.
That's a really good point. I think that the thing is you would think, well, with all that success, but success makes it worse.
Yeah,
success makes the insecurity worse, especially when everybody in the world thinks you're one of the greatest actors that ever lived, and he doesn't think that, or he doesn't.
I mean, that's a recipe for
imposter,
feeling like a fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what's our top 5?
Oh, it's top Gene Hackman performances, obviously. So get that up.
This will be interesting. I think because I had a personal evolution in Gene Hackman that is not chronological. First of all, have you ever seen Gene Hackman be bad in a movie?
I have not.
I haven't, and I can always find, if I think about it hard enough, like a performance or a character, like things like, he is good in everything he's ever done.
Yeah.
And he was a serious actor up there with all the serious actors, but he would do Superman and he would crush it. And he would come in and he just elevated the whole thing.
He was hilarious as Lex Luthor.
He was a fantastic Lex Luthor.
Well, he was so funny. Just like he was like evil, but funny evil. Like he just cracked me up on that thing.
So Night Moves. Did you see Night Moves?
Yeah.
With the Arthur Penn?
Yep. For me, Mississippi Burning was such a revelation for me as a young guy. That's got to be in my top 5.
It makes sense because the movie's flawed, but he is so good in the movie. He makes
what you don't like them punishing racists?
I love them punishing racists, but I like a sound, coherent plot.
That's a coherent plot. What are you talking about?
Go back and watch it.
I watched it like a month ago.
Go back. You did?
Yeah.
I watched it not too long ago. I don't think it's a great movie. For me, my all-time favorite is Unforgiven.
Unforgiven that's the next one I was going to say. I was waiting for you to pick one, but Unforgiven is not just a great Gene Hackman performance, but maybe one of the best movies ever made.
And I would put it above Mississippi Burning.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to disagree. I think Unforgiven is one of the best movies ever made.
I think you got to put Papa Doyle and the French Connection up there. But this is going to be tough because we got The Conversation, we got Night Moves, we got Scarecrow.
I don't think it's a fantastic movie overall, but I talk about powerhouse performances. Crimson Tide is just stacked cast with all of the greatest actors of all time. Like,
fuck yeah, man.
How did they get that cast?
Yeah, the only actor that can fill the screen next to Gene Hackman is Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington.
And them two powerhouses just going at it.
I mean, like, we didn't know. I don't think we knew that Denzel was fully Denzel yet. Like, we knew he was great. We didn't know he was the level of great that he actually is. But we watched that movie and then we're like, oh yeah, no, that's
the movie that did it.
Yeah, because if you can go toe to toe with a absolute legend like Gene Hackman and feel like you're taking up your share of the screen space,
right?
That is impressive. That's an impressive thing.
I think we have to go with the conversation.
The conversation is pretty great. It is also very strange. It's a strange movie to me, but I recognize it's great.
If we're looking at performances, like his performance and what he does in that, and again, like he's always like these off kilter, complex characters that you root for, but you don't really know why you're rooting for him. Is Scarecrow on here? But if you don't remember Ty, then it doesn't count.
I don't really remember it. Yeah, I would say that while it's not my favorite movie on the list, I would say that his performance in Hoosiers is an incredible performance.
Yeah, I loved his performance. I wasn't a big fan of the movie though.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the movie either, but he's amazing in it.
Right.
I remember watching Uncommon Valor, and I couldn't get over the fact, like, it's a decent movie. It's fine, and Gene Hackman, of course, is great in it because he always is. The dude in Uncommon Valor who plays the demolition expert, the one who like sets the landmines and stuff, is named Reb Brown. He's the star of one of my favorite Mystery Science Theaters, Space Mutiny. It's such a terrible movie, and he's so terrible in it. Like, and I saw that before I saw Uncommon Valor. So when he showed up in Uncommon Valor, I'm like, what is Space Mutiny guy doing in this? So it made it hard for me to like pay close attention. I didn't see Uncommon Valor when it first came out. I watched it like not that long ago. I was very curious about it.
Should we do a comedy just to pay a shout out to his comedic, like the Royal Tenenbaums?
I mean, Royal Tenenbaums is pretty great.
Yeah.
I would not argue against that. Honestly, do you think he's funnier in Royal Tenenbaums or do you think he's funnier in Birdcage? Because I think he's pretty fucking hilarious in Birdcage.
I do too. And I think Birdcage is hard to pull off, right?
It's so hard to pull off.
Yeah. I think the level of difficulty is harder in that when you're surrounded by Robin Williams and Nathan Lane.
Yeah, exactly. To be funny in a film where people are watching Robin Williams be Robin Williams.
Yeah.
That's not you just did a dive. That's like you did the triple axel backflip 360 dive, right?
Yeah. What an accomplishment. You know, he's done over 70 movies and I can't think of one performance that was off note, off key.
I remember really liking him in Poseidon Adventure when I saw that the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, not a good movie. In fact, maybe one of the worst movies on this list, but I fucking love it, is The Quick and the Dead.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
I actually
it is
like
not
that
a good movie,
too.
but I love that movie. If it's on and I happen to walk by, I'll stop and watch it.
I liked it too. I thought it was good. I don't think it goes on the list.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm looking at this list. I'm going through my mental list of everything I've seen him in, and I cannot ever think of him being bad. He's been in movies that I don't think are good.
Mm-hmm.
Superman 4.
Oh my god! Superman 4 is one of the worst movies of all time. But is that the one? Is that the one? Because he's chewing the scenery in that movie.
Is that the one with the nuclear guy?
Yeah, with Nuclear Man.
Oh god,
he is chewing the scenery in that movie.
I don't remember him in that movie. Can you
yeah, man, that might be. We might have found the one. We might have found the exception that proves the rule.
Holy shit! Is that the one?
But that
Joseph?
was such a terrible movie. I don't think it would be possible to be good in that movie.
Yeah, and I like Gene Hackman's third act. I like that he went to Santa's Fe. I like that he wrote novels, that he painted, that he spent time with his wife. There's something really nice about that. No, did you ever read any of his novels?
I haven't. I want to now. I have not, and I I'm going to because I'm curious about them. And you know, I mean, the reality is everybody gets old. Getting old is undignified. It's fucking undignified.
Right.
And I like that when he got old enough that he started to his health was bad. He got dementia, all those things. That it was a quiet moment. You know, it was him, it was his wife and their little house in Santa Fe, or actually it was big property, but their house in Santa Fe, and they just have a gentle glide slope out of life. You know, I'm happy that he got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's check the patron top 5 to see if they know you guys. So, Unforgiven, French Connection,
Of course.
Hoosiers,
Yep.
Birdcage.
Oh, they went Young Frankenstein. I respect that.
This dude, isn't that crazy? 3 out of 5.
It's always 3 out of 5.
Always 3 out of 5. Thank you guys for hanging out. Please like and subscribe. Fuck it, don't do it. It's too late now. Sorry. I hope you
please
enjoyed
leave
this.
a comment on this telling Wes how hard you're not liking and not subscribing.
Smash that dislike.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly you are not going to.
But if you say something mean about me, you have to say something mean about Ty. All right?
No, don't say anything mean about me. I'll come to your house.
Yeah. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.